So now your loom is ready to warp. The first thing I do is I tie off my end piece because there has to be some kind of tension while you're actually warping it. And I'll show you how to get rid of this at the very end. The next thing you want to know is that you want your tension rod about halfway down on its track. You don't want it too tight, it'll pull the thread too tight and it'll screw up your pattern. You don't want it too loose because that's what you actually loosen it up to be able to move your threads. So we're going to go over the top peg, and this is where we're going to use our heddle peg and those heddles that we made. So you're going to take your heddle, you're going to go under the thread and then loop it back so that it pulls it down. Okay? And then we're going to wind it around the rest of its pegs. The next one, the next pass goes underneath of that top peg. And then the rest follows suit. And you're going to repeat this. You're going to repeat this 5 times. Next one goes over top. You take one of your heddles, loop it behind. If you can see that, you're looping it behind and then bringing it down. And I like to scoot my threads down as I go. And when I first started doing this, it was very intimidating. And I think a lot of people think that, but there's actually, it's very calming to just sit and warp a loom. I think so anyway. All right, so then the last one was over top, so this one's going to be down. And warping it, even if your pegs are in a different place or you have a bigger or smaller loom, this is still going to be the same warp that you use. Okay. Last one that's going over top before we get to an actual pattern thread. One of the other things too to remember is when you go around these pegs, you are always going to be going around the pegs from the outside, never the inside. All right, so we've gotten down to here and we're getting ready to add our first pattern thread. So what you're going to do is, what I like to do is I take and I cut it a couple of inches out past the loom. And then you take the end of your pattern thread and you're just going to tie it off. Okay. And it's okay if it comes up a little bit. If you want to shove it back a little bit more, you can. By just knotting it down a little bit further. There we go. There we go. All right, so this first pattern thread, now this is a 5 pattern thread pattern, okay? So your first pattern thread's gonna be under your top peg. And you're just gonna loop it the way you loop the rest. Okay. Push everything down. All right. And that's the only pattern thread that you're putting on there. You're not going to continuously do it. So you take it, cut it off, and you go back to your background thread. And I know it seems a little tedious, but when you're weaving, almost, and no matter what kind of weaving you're doing, your setup is probably the most important part of it, because it's what sets your patterns, honestly. All right, so then we're gonna go over. Bring it around, and we go under that top peg. All right, and then this brings us to our next pattern thread. Now our next pattern thread is going to be actually over the top peg rather than under it. And starting off, when you start off with your background threads, I like to start off with like four to five of your background threads, as like a border. You can do more, you can do less. All right, so this one's going up over top of. Put it under. And again, that will be the only pattern thread for this pass. You're not going to continue with it. You take it, cut it, and go back to your background thread. And you're going to continue like this until you have 5 pattern threads.